Hey guys, my name is Abhishek Avhad and I am an Ironman triathlete and a RAM qualified ultra cyclist. And this is my first video, and I'm planning to start a series of videos where I want to educate the viewers about cycling and triathlon in general. Okay, you can follow me on my Instagram page, which is calves of steel, calves.of.steel, where I post a lot of my cycling and triathlon activities and other information. Okay, moving on. So today the topic of discussion is going to be power. Okay, I had a very interesting debate with someone in with a fellow rider in a group, and he wanted to know whether he can rely on the Strava power, the power which is shown in Strava. And today we are going to deep dive into what power is, and we are going to see if if Strava does a good job on the power calculation or the power estimation, and whether we can use that in training. Okay, let's begin. So first of all, let's understand what power is. Okay, so power is the torque, is torque into cadence. Torque is the pressure you put on the pedal. It is measured in Newton meters. Okay, and cadence is how fast you pedal. It is measured in RPM. Now most of us would be very aware of cadence. We generally tend to ride it at 85 to 90 cadence. Okay, so to calculate power, you have to measure torque and cadence. Okay, now measuring cadence is straightforward. The the cheapest cadence sensor will be somewhere in the range of 1,000 rupees. Okay, but to measure torque is something which is much more complicated. Okay, so basically the torque is measured by your power meter, and because the technology to measure that torque correctly and accurately is expensive, and that is why the power meters that you have in the market today are expensive, the cheapest being somewhere in the range of 35,000. Okay, so basically power is torque into cadence. Now what we have to understand is torque is measured. It is measured by something called as the strain gauge. Let me show you pictures of the strain gauge. Okay, this is how the strain gauge looks. I don't want to deep down. I don't want to dive deep into it. Okay, so yeah, power is torque into cadence. Okay, your power meter will measure torque. It will measure cadence, and it will multiply torque and cadence to calculate power. Okay, what you have to understand is power here is not measured directly. It is always calculated, and it is calculated using torque. If you calculate power without torque or without cadence, without any one of these, you're not calculating power, you are only estimating power. Okay, now let us take this example ahead. So what happens now? Look at the equation. Okay, what happens if cadence is 0? Your power becomes 0. That is why when you're cycling and if you stop pedaling, the power that you're putting through the pedals is 0. Okay, it's actually very intuitive. Okay, so now to check whether actual power numbers and the Strava power numbers, do they match? I did a test. Before I do the test, let us see how Strava calculates power. Okay, now here is the Strava's calculation. Here it says the total power is equal to the rolling resistance plus wind plus gravity plus acceleration. Notice how Strava's power estimate does not use torque. It does not use cadence. So whatever these numbers are, these are going to be huge estimates. I do not believe that Strava is going to get it right. Okay, simply because Strava doesn't have data. Let's look at for example, let's look at wind. Okay, here Strava is making a very big assumption. Because we do not know wind speed or air density during your ride, we assume no environmental wind conditions and an outside conditions of 15 degrees Celsius. Now, anybody training with power or anybody who knows basics of cycling will understand how much of a difference a wind makes, in your speed. So when you essentially assume that there are no environmental wind conditions, this estimate is going to change a lot. Okay, and this is the most important part of the Strava calculation. The gravity and acceleration. So Strava assumes anytime you increase your speed on a flat road, you are accelerating and you are applying more power. And Strava has access to gradient data. Okay, so Strava knows if there is a climb, it will take that into its calculations. Okay, so now to do this test, I rode the same route from Dadar to my home in Mumbai. Sorry, to my home in Chembur. Okay, so the first I used two different bike computers for that. Now the first bike computer that I used was, or rather a watch, was the Garmin Forerunner 920. Okay, this is the Garmin Forerunner 920. I've been using it since my first Ironman. And the second file, and side by side, I had one more bike computer with me, which was the Wahoo Element Bolt. This is the one, and I was riding with Asioma power meter pedals. So this little file here has actual power data, has power data which is accurate, has power data which is actually calculated. Now let's compare these two rides with each other. Okay, now just to get the basics right, let's verify if the basic information is matching, that is the distance and the moving time. Fair enough. 10.52, 24.4, 10.54, 24.43. The difference is because there was a time lag between pausing both of bike computers. Let's get the basic rights. This was my morning ride. This is without power data. So when I go to the analysis, you see, if I don't use a power meter, Strava denotes the power that it calculates is called the estimated power, and it is denoted by a black line. You see this line? This is the estimated power. And if you happen to use an actual power meter, Strava denotes just power. And if you notice, the line is blue. Okay, so now my power meter has an inbuilt cadence sensor. It has to have a cadence sensor, because as you know, like I said, without cadence I cannot calculate power. Okay, so now let's compare these two activities side by side. Number one, let's start with, okay, see the average numbers here. The average number here is 129. Okay, and the actual power number is 144. So that's a difference of 16 watts. Fair enough. It's like a 15% difference. Okay, so now if we just compare the average power, the estimated average power, and the actual average power, we tend to conclude that maybe Strava has got it right. Okay, but now the problem is in the detail. Okay, now just on an overview, if you see here, look at how spiky this graph is, you know, because every time there is a wind, my power will increase. Every time I start pedaling, see here, every time I do an RPM of let's say over 100, my power will increase. You see how spiky this graph is? Now compare this with the estimated chart, which is much more smoother. Okay, it is smoother because I don't accelerate that much. Strava is not programmed, or Strava doesn't have information about the actual pressure that I am putting in the pedals. It doesn't know what cadence I'm riding at. Okay, so let me just, I think, now let's do a detailed comparison over here. So the first 2 kilometers, let me highlight the first 2 kilometers over here, and the first 2 kilometers over here. Okay, see, now this is where, as and when you go more into detail, you will understand what is the obvious drawbacks of Strava power. Here it shows an average of 76, whereas the actual is 100, which is a very big difference. Okay, now let's look at kilometer 2 to 4 over here, and we take 2 to 4. Actually, let me take 1.5 to 2.5, and the same goes with here, 1.5 to approximately 2.5. You see, the estimated power is 78, whereas the actual power is much higher. And here you see there is a huge jump in power. And this was actually, if anybody rides near Dadar, this was near Shivaji Park, and I took a right turn and I decided to just increase my cadence and burst into a short sprint, and that is the reason why you see my cadence has reached a maximum of 118 and my power was up to 884. Now compare that with what Strava does. See, Strava is very good at noticing when you accelerate. Okay, it sees that here I am at 18. Let me put this as time. So at 5:36, 5 minutes 36 minutes, that 5 minutes 36 seconds, I am at 18 kmph. and within 5 seconds I go to 37. So in 5 seconds I have increased my speed. This is something Strava catches, and it shows a jump in power. So it estimates power based on that. Let's go back to the Strava power equation. You see this little bit acceleration. That is why Strava is trying to estimate a power of 438. But that's the max Strava can do. It can only estimate, whereas the actual power is 884. Now that's a big difference. Let's look at where. Yes, so here I'm seeing something strange. Between 10 minutes and 13.2, 10 and 13.2, 10 and 13.2. Here Strava uh, has estimated a peak power of 1274. Now anybody who rides with power will tell you how big of a number 1274 is. It's it's out of bound of most, or rather I would say most of Indian amateur cyclists. We cannot generate that number. That's such a big number, and that occurs at around 11:15. Now, whereas the actual power at 11:15 is just 240 watts. So somehow Strava has got this quite wrong. And notice the graph of power and cadence. Notice how it will always coincide with each other. The reason being, power is torque into cadence. Now now this is what I thought for the first time, that maybe I didn't have a cadence sensor with the Garmin. If I had the cadence sensor, if Strava had cadence in its for its calculation, I thought maybe it would have done a better job. So now to check that, here we can clearly see Strava has nothing to do with cadence. If I was working for Strava, I would definitely change this equation based on the cadence. It doesn't matter if you speed up. If you're not pedaling, you're not applying power. As simple as that. Now let me look at, yeah, this is one of this is my friend's power data, and this is my friend's ride. He's not using a power meter, and I noticed there is a small descent here, and yes, so this is the pedal road. I think this is the pedal road decline. So notice how in this decline he isn't pedaling at all. He doesn't have to, right? So he's not pedaling, so technically his power is 0. But because there is a change in his speed, so that means there is acceleration, Strava is estimating power. Now this, to my mind, is a very wrong estimate. Imagine your average, it shows your average power for this 30-second descent as 100 watts and a max power of 372. Whereas we know the average power is 0, max power is also 0. So this is one big limitation of Strava. It doesn't take cadence into the equation. Now let me do some more comparison of my own ride. For example, here, yes, I did, before I ended the ride, I did two big efforts. The first one was somewhere around four. So for 14 seconds, wow. For 14 seconds, I averaged 879 watts. Now let's see if Strava was able to. So I did two efforts. Let's see if Strava was able to catch these efforts. It does, but not in the way you would expect. So yes, it has noticed that I've done two efforts. However, it hasn't got the power numbers anywhere right. For the first effort, I hit a max power of 879. Strava, on the other hand, predicts I could do just 220 on the first effort. On the second effort, I was actually quite tired and I was fading. That is when I did 760 watts. And Strava here measures that the power to be around 546, much higher than my first interval, whereas the actual numbers are the exact opposite. Now this was the problem which I had with their equation. I have many problems with their equation. Number one was, like we discussed, it depends on the acceleration. Okay, the other problem I have with the Strava equation is that it doesn't consider wind. Okay, it says that total power is rolling resistance plus wind plus gravity plus acceleration, but when we deep dive, it says because we do not know wind speed or air density during the ride, we don't assume that there is wind. Now let me show you a few of my rides, and that will help you understand why wind matters a lot. Okay, so here let's discuss the assumption that there isn't wind. Okay, and wind doesn't affect power. Now as you can see, this is the Eastern Express Highway, one of my favorite routes and one of the most popular routes in Mumbai. And if anybody has ridden this, they will know that in the morning there's a very good wind from the north to the south. So this direction, the wind flows from the north to the south, and it is, in fact, it is even, if you download or if you see any of the wind maps or these apps which give you accurate information. So in the mornings, generally the wind flows from northeast. Okay, from this direction. So let's see, when I am trying to ride from the north, from the south, sorry, from the south to the north, to hit an average speed of 30 from 30 kmph, I have to push a power of 162 and my heart rate reaches around 145. Okay, so now when I come back, now this time I'm moving, while going towards the north, I had headwinds, so naturally while coming back I am going to have a nice tailwind. So when I have a tailwind, now to hit 28 kmph, that's just 2 kmph short, I have to apply a power of just 98 watts. That is 60% less. And naturally my heart rate is going to be much lower. Imagine this is after almost an hour of riding, but my heart rate is still lower, indicating that I'm not applying a lot of pressure, which again is indicated by my power, but still I am getting a lot of speed. Now, Strava, I didn't record this with another device, but I am 100% sure if Strava had to calculate, it would calculate same power for both these segments, simply because I was riding at the same speed. This, to my mind, is one of the biggest reasons why Strava will never get the power numbers right. That is my number one problem with Strava, that this equation is bound to fail. And the number two problem which I have with using Strava numbers is that you don't see these numbers on a live basis. If you don't see these numbers in front of you in real time basis, you cannot make use of power. You cannot train with them. You will never know how hard you're going on a real time basis. So these numbers for practical, even if let's say even if I assume that Strava gives out the best numbers which are super accurate, I cannot use them. And think about it, the whole reason of using power instead of heart rate or instead of speed is the accuracy that it provides. If these numbers themselves are not accurate, then they are not reliable. If they are not reliable, they are not usable. Okay, so this is so to conclude, let me just say these two things. Strava is good for a lot of things, but definitely not for estimating power. So if you're riding on the road, you any which ways do not have access to Strava power. It comes after you upload the data. So my aim is to not focus on Strava power numbers. These numbers do not make sense at all. So just go there, ride your bike, focus on heart rate, focus on getting a good and nice cadence, focus on how you're feeling when you're riding, and be committed to your training plan. So for more information and more analysis and more of what I do, please follow me on Instagram. My handle name is Calves of Steel, and this is where I post a lot of my cycling and triathlon race information and other interesting stuff. Okay, and this is the new channel which I have started. I aim to call it the Triathlon Made Easy. So let me know if you liked the content, and what else would you like to hear from me. Okay, this is Abhishek of Heart signing off. Thank you for listening.